Welcome to Enneagram Conversations with Renee Siegel. Maybe you know your Enneagram type, but what's next? Renee uses the Enneagram in conjunction with self-awareness practices to help people better understand the patterns of their type, including patterns of thinking, emotions, and behaviors. This show is highly interactive. Listen or call in to find out how to identify your type, and for those who do know their type, what can you do next to open yourself up to a greater capacity for personal transformation? We all have great strengths, sitting alongside areas that we need to strengthen. It starts with noticing your patterns. You'll begin to discern whether you need to step in and take action or just sit back and observe. Learn how to dance between observation and participation and watch yourself transform. Enneagram Conversations starts now.
Welcome, everybody. I am so excited because today we have two amazing guests that will speak to you about our Type 2. I am Renee Siegel, your host, and I welcome all the viewers and listeners joining today to hear from the narrative of themselves, of Robin and Alex, as they converse about their type, which happens to be my type. So I just get to sit and listen and learn so much more. I always learn so much from hearing other people talk about their type. But when it's my type, I really pay special attention because there's lots for me to learn, way lots for me to learn. Anyway, welcome, Alex. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robin is a repeat guest. She's been on before, and Alex is brand new to us as a guest here, but certainly not brand new to me. I've known Alex for about 6 years. I've known Robin for a lot longer, and they have been studying the Enneagram and using it in their life. So could you tell us a little bit, each of you, about your Enneagram journey, like how you got introduced to the Enneagram and how you knew that you were this type, Type 2?
Sure, ladies first.
If you like. So I learned the Enneagram from Richard Rohr in the 1980s with his first set of cassette tapes. I don't even know if you can find those anymore. And became really interested because the Type 2 just named who I was. And I did a lot of reading and lots of books, and all the way through the rest of the 80s and the 90s. And then in the year 2000, Carol Whitaker, one of our co-teachers, came up and did a class in Sedona, and it was like, nailed. And so I've been teaching it, using it in my life ever since.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on to Alex, what do you tell our listeners and viewers about the value? I mean, where you've found value. I mean, I know that, but they don't. So
for all of us, our type is our blind spot, which by definition we cannot see, right? And it doesn't usually go well when other people tell us. And so the Enneagram was able to see my blind spot. So as a helper giver, it was news to me that my help was not always helpful or wanted or whatever. So that was really the big awakening. And then the other piece of that awakening was the core wound that I need to be needed, and learning to relate to that whole thing very differently, so that, that need is not needy. And so those two things in combination really made a huge difference. Lifetime for me since then.
Yeah. And we're going to unpack that in a much bigger way as we start to look at the challenges and the assets of the type, and really kind of take a deeper dive into that Type 2 character structure and how all that works together. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I found the Enneagram in 2015, so 6 years ago, and it was because of Renee introduced it to me. I'd go to her conferences, lectures, and all of that, and it was a brand new topic for me. And I was reading Richard Rohr, like you brought up earlier, but it was about recovery. It wasn't so much of Enneagram. It was about 12 steps, recovery, as I was on this recovery journey. And then Renee showed me this Enneagram, how it can be practiced not just in life and recovery, but learning about myself so I can have more contentment in my life. Because Renee knows me from 6 years ago, a very rocky past of mine. And I've been able to use the tools of the Enneagram to learn about myself, learn that I'm a helper giver. I need attention. I need to be needed. And I didn't know how this was a survival tool for me to get through life. And a lot of this being unaware of why I do these things, a lot of reacting, not responding, didn't give me the results I wanted in life. Of being needed and being liked, of being helpful, and how being unaware of these things actually was sabotaging a lot of it. And then once I learned about myself and wow, this is what I do, this is how I survive, this is how I get through the day, knowing that everybody too has certain different ways of how they communicate, how they say there's the 5 languages of love and whatnot, that it just really expanded my mind. And I'm not an expert on it, but I've known about it since 2015. And I find it to be very, very helpful in my life. And I'm happy I stumbled across it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you both brought up so many things that I wish we could just spend a ton of time talking about it. It's such a great transformational tool, but just knowing your type is kind of just scratching the surface in the beginning. I mean, a lot of people hear the word Enneagram. It's an odd word, little less odd today with the proliferation of the internet and people doing a lot of things online and podcasts and things like this, but it is an odd word. And, they can just identify their type and go, wow, this is me. Or they can do a lot more. Some people, it like whets your appetite and you just want more, you want to know more. And I know that both of you come from that kind of experience with the Enneagram. It's like, okay, that's true. And that's true. And, what's next? Or how do I know more? So let's talk a little bit about the value of speaking to another person about your type. I mean, we opened up the issue of communication, how it holds value, but where's the value of letting another person know more about you as a 2, or somebody identifies as a 2?
It's sort of reversed for me, Renee. This actually revolutionized my relationship with my husband and my daughter. So when you talk about that funny word, Enneagram, meaning 9 fundamentally different operating systems,
yeah,
that was what I learned. And so truly, I never really did think my husband was trying to think of ways to annoy me when he woke up. But the day I got it, he was a head type. I was a heart type. It really fundamentally changed everything because I realized he was waking up in his head, and that's how he processed everything. Every morning, the same thing. He woke up a head type, and it was not about me. It was about him. And our daughter, who is a body type, the same thing. She learned this when she was 16. She's now 37. And I thought we were the same type. We weren't even the same center. And so she was looking for her voice as a type 9. And I had all this really wonderful, good advice for her. And turns out it was not helpful. And so that's the first thing that comes up for me with that question is how fundamentally different we are, and that I needed to be able to not just come from my own point of view, but to see where they were coming from, whether it was a body type or a head type, processing very differently than I did. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I'm able to communicate, or better able to communicate, how the heart piece is really important for me, and feelings and such.
Yeah. So before we move on to Alex, and I want you to respond to this, I want to just kind of bring everybody aboard. Some of our readers are really familiar and seasoned with the Enneagram, but what Robin's referring to is that not only do we academically make the statement that, oh, you see the world differently than me, we have a way of even looking at that. And in these three triads of the Enneagram, it's like there is a way of looking at the world or coming into the world through this intuitive kind of way of engaging with the world through the body types, which are types 8s, 9s, and 1s. We have a way of engaging with the world relationally, that everything is kind of related, and we really get off on talking about those kinds of things as heart types, which are types 2s, 3s, and 4s. And we have a way of logically sequencing and mentalizing and strategizing our way through life, which is the strategy of the 5s, 6s, and 7s. And when we get that people are just doing that because they're part of that type and they're not trying to annoy us, I love that. It is a game changer, right?
It is.
It is. Yeah. Alex, how about you?
I like what you just said about like reversing it a little bit. It's more so I'm learning about my dad, how he's a loyalist, and how being loyal and honest with him goes such a long way, rather than with my mom, who's a 9 and she just wants peace in the household. So learning about the different types is really beneficial for me. I don't know if I'm answering the question or anything. It's just that learning about other people's way of communicating makes me understand them, and also makes it less rocky in our relationships, because before the Enneagram, a lot of my relationships were rocky and I did not know why. But learning that what I need is different from what my parents need, or girlfriend needs, or boss needs. There are different ways of looking at the world that is real to each person. So I don't know if I answered that question.
Yeah, no, very real to each person and their perspective and how they place the priority. I mean, my husband's a head type. He wants just the facts, he really is interested in the facts. And I've learned to value the facts because I've learned to value him. I've learned to value the facts a lot more than I ever have valued the facts before, but it certainly isn't, the place where I begin to participate with anyone is the facts. I want to participate by engaging. So, when we're going to take a break in just a minute, but one of the things that I think this is a great setup for is because the type 2 sits in this heart triad, it sits in this engaging and relational triad and is hungry to engage and relate and be liked and converse and make eye contact and feel emotionally connected, the connectivity to another person. That's what's running the show. That's the underlying operating system here that Robin was referencing earlier. That operating system, that's what's running the show. That's what's behind the curtain, right? Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. My name is Renee Siegel. Thank you so much for joining us today. And when we come back from break, both Robin and Alex will talk to us about challenges of being the type, the assets of being the type, what they'd most like you to know, a tidbit that you can take away about type 2. And again, thank you for joining Enneagram Conversations. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining Enneagram Conversations. We are back with Robin and Alex, our type 2s, together today, talking about their type and things that they want you to know about their type, challenges and assets of their type. And before we move into some challenges and assets, we're going to take a step back and just talk about an assessment, taking an Enneagram assessment, finding your type, landing on your type. So, a lot of times you can take tests online, you can take written tests, you can actually have typing interviews with Enneagram teachers and practitioners. And sometimes you don't know, your type. You look at an assessment and it shows that you might be more than one type. So there's a richness in journeying to your type. There's a richness in landing in your type. Did both of you know from the get-go that you were type 2s, or did you think that you might be something else, another type?
I knew I was a 2, and this is back in the 80s and all those books. But the interesting thing is, you know, when Carol came up in the year 2000, and I actually took the first class I'd ever taken from her, my paragraphs were 8, 4, 2. And that was confusing. And I said, what's that about? And she said, could you be a 2 under stress, which was that top type. So I learned a lot in that moment about, you know, how we are when we're more relaxed and when we're more stressed. But bottom line is that, you know, there is no getting around that my type is a 2.
Yeah. That's an excellent point that you make. And Alex, did you know you were a 2 when you first got started?
The interesting thing about taking the test, and I did not know I was a type 2 because I didn't know the personalities. I just knew the names of it. And hopeless romantic, I was very drama queen at the time. So I figured, you know, this is probably where I stand. But after doing the test, which I like to stress, doing the test alone, because especially as a type 2, if I take a test with someone in the room, I'm going to people please the test in my mind to people please the person in the room. Everybody who's taken the test with me in the room, their type doesn't show up. And when they take it alone, it's a different type. So when I did the test on the internet, the questionnaire, it was a type 2, like 100% pretty much. And it was just saying the way I am. And I'm like, wow, I am a type 2. And once I took the test and saw the questions and answers, I was like, this is the way I am in life. This is the way I show up in life. And there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. And, you know, you've both brought up some great points. And I want to add one more point about taking the test. First of all, the journey to finding your type is very rich. When you start to look at what's running the show, your underlying core motivations, no matter whether you're mistyped or typed correctly, it's more important that you really take a look at it from your own vantage point, number one. But the other thing is that you can take a test and answer questions based on it being a snapshot in your life, or you can take a test and look at how it's looked as you've looked throughout your life. And I'll give you an example, a personal example. The first time I took an Enneagram test, I was a single mom and I raised 6 kids on my own. And I took the test as soon as they had all left home. And so I had gone to Alaska, Hawaii, and Europe all in 1 year. And I had never done any of that before. And so I was answering all these questions, and Robin's actually probably already a step ahead of me. And so I answer all these questions, and I've tried food that I've never tried, and I've gone to places I've never gone to, and I've been doing all these amazing things. And of course, I did not show up as a type 2. I showed up as a type 7. And then I started studying with an Enneagram teacher who started to talk to me about, you know, you come with such warmth and such engagement with other people, and you're really not showing up as a 7. And I have to tell you, I really wanted to be a 7 because I thought the description of the 7 looked really appealing. And the underlying core motivation for me to do all those things was I had finally had the freedom to explore and do those things. Those were not things that I was just wired to do. They were things that I was expressing at the moment, at that point in time. So I was asked to go back and take the test based on what my life looked like, my whole life looked like, or maybe with less attention paid to my needs right now, because we've all done work on ourselves, you know, and the more work you do on yourselves, the more likely you might not show up at that as the type, because all of the assessments, whether written, unless they're oral, whether written in paragraph or on the internet, are based on the average expression of that type. You know, and I really want people to understand that the journey to finding your type is very, very rich, very, very rich. So if you've been mistyped, or you think that you have scored a couple of different types, try on a type for a day, walk around in that type for a day, a week, and see what it feels like. Because when it resonates with you and it hits home, and you landed on your type, you know it. It's like the cells in your body vibrate to that type. So you each discovered your type in different ways. You through assessment, and you did a paragraph assessment, Robin?
Well, no, I mean, I did in 2000. That's the first time I saw the David Daniels Essential Enneagram book back in its original form from Stanford. But I learned I was a 2 through the tapes that Richard Rohr did.
Got it.
And then I read more books as I went along.
So you can listen to tapes,
read books, and then, but it always came back to the 2.
Yeah. So now taking a little bit deeper dive, I'd love to hear from each one of you. And please feel free to engage with each other. What qualities showed up that had your cells vibrating and resonating with that particular type?
Alex, give it a shot.
Well, I mean, it was 6 years ago. So going back to that exact moment of time, but is kind of, I haven't thought about that in a while. But what shows up today and going back is the need to be seen is a big thing. The need to be helpful. The way I set up business relationships in the office is I live by this rule of being indispensable, where if I'm going to work for somebody, I'm going to be so good that if they fire me or I quit, they won't be able to survive without me. And I thrive by that. And I read that in a business book, be indispensable. And I resonated with that in this business book back when 2012 maybe, but I carried that message all the way up to today. And not until I did this Enneagram that I saw, oh, this is a survival mechanism. This is total survival, that this is how I show up. And I think maybe it showed up because my parents had a child after me, my sister, and maybe I needed to be seen because I thought I was being abandoned. I don't know why, but that's what I think. I probably think differently later. But that and the need of connection, like Renee was just talking about, if I open the door for someone, I want you to look in my eyes and say, how you doing? And I don't get that in society today. But I go to like a smaller town, people look at each other in the eyes and wave, and it fills my heart up with joy. So just the learning, that's some of the big things, is that connection with people and needing to be needed.
I was never conscious of the need to be needed, but that connection piece was huge for me from the beginning. So even at the age of 14, I was creating community and making connections. And so that has worked for me lifetime, where, there's a lot of leadership maybe involved in that at times as well, but connecting with other people and knowing that they know that you care for them, and having that reciprocal, that that you are being cared for, you are loved. It's just this lovely sort of water wheel of caring and receiving and giving. And so that has held me for all these many years of being in community, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's work, of this whole thing of how we connect and how we bring out the best in each other and how we bring out the best in ourselves. So that would be sort of the higher side for me, empowering other people, being empowered, all of that fits together in that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the dangerous parts that happened with me, this is why I love the Enneagram, because there's this little toxic thing that I will do of being wanted, needed, and going to any length for other people, and it's not reciprocal for me, where I'll put myself into dangerous situations for other people when that love is not reciprocal. So learning to stop and take care of myself. Before this, I'm just sitting around, dancing around, exercising a little bit, and coming back home to take care of myself is just a
Right.
huge growth for me in life.
Yeah. Yeah, you're both dancing around the topic of connection and engagement. And, when we come back from break, we're going to talk a whole lot about dancing around connection and engagement as it relates to losing the connection with self,
Right.
which you kind of just touched on the topic of. So we have this abundant need. It's like this innate kind of need to be connected, and that connection is felt very viscerally in terms of going outward and being part of community, being part of relationships, being part of family, people smiling at you, having that mirror, come back to you in return. But the part that has been neglected and not attended to in a full-bodied way is the major connection that we have at birth, and that is the connection to ourselves. And so we're going to come back and speak a bit about that in just a moment. My name is Renee Siegel, and I am so pleased that our viewers and listeners are with us on Enneagram Conversations today, joined by my lovely guests, Robin and Alex. I hope you'll stay tuned. Join us after break. Welcome back to Enneagram Conversations as we continue our conversations with our two guests who are both type 2s, the helper or giver. And we are now going to talk about the loss of connection. We were just talking about the importance of connection with others, and the loss of connection, or the need to rekindle the connection with the most important relationship we'll ever have in our entire lives. And that's the relationship that we have with ourselves. So go at it, Robin and Alex. I know you each have a maybe similar, but your own personal experiences around this topic.
So as I said before, I wasn't really aware that I needed to be needed. And at any time in my life that I have lost myself, it has to do with that codependence of the two. We joke, used to have this with my husband, that one of the reasons he was drawn to me was because of my independence. And the day we got married, instead of picking up the weddings or, the marriage certificate, I picked up one that I later learned said codependent. And it was almost like I switched overnight and became dependent on what he thought of me to be me. And that was so curious. It really took quite a long time for me to work my way through that, to sort of regain my own sense of self, which I might do in another setting, but to be able to do it in that home setting that is so intimate. And so the only way I've ever been able to do that is through faith or through spiritual work, but reconnecting with my own sense of self and the God who's got my back, in the ways I understand that. And so anytime that I'm confused about what to say about something or how to respond to something, or I don't know what the decision is, what I come back to is I've lost my sense of self. Mm-hmm. And every single time it just means time, wake up, go back, reconnect with your own soul, with your own source, and every single time I do that comes clarity and peace and the ability to be in the flow instead of just confused and helpless and needy.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that whole sense of self is so important to me, and the philosophies that I like to think about all day long of individualism and knowing about how much I lose that connection to self because I don't want to lose that connection to you. So I'm in toxic relationship or just a normal relationship, I will go along the lines of their beliefs, even though that's not my beliefs. But I feel like a chameleon where I can go into so many different relationships with people and not be authentic. And this really didn't get me far in life. It wasn't until recently, around the whole lockdown situation, where I had more time to myself, more time to be authentic to what I wanted to do in the days, that really my life started changing. I was in a business relationship where I was very unhappy and I lost who I was. I was in a romantic relationship where, like you were saying, Robin, the day that I got married, right, is the day that I kind of lost myself, if I heard that story right. And that happens in most relationships today, is that I get into these relationships and then they like my individualism, and then it switches to people pleasing, where I want to people please. And if it gets so bad and toxic, I don't want to break it off because I don't want to break that connection. It's like a life force to be connected to someone else. And I don't want to lose that, even if it's hurting me. So learning this last year during the lockdowns, where I started coming back home, coming back to me and my higher power of God, and started actually taking actions that I believed in, everything changed. I live a vocational life today. I do what I love every day. I wake up when I want to wake up. Everything shifted within a year of doing this.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy when you start to think about that. And there's this beautiful, sweet gift that's kind of the flip side of all of this, in that the type 2, because of the attention that's paid externally or to the beloved or to another or a colleague or a friend, and there's so much attention that's really placed there and paid in those relationships, that you actually are pretty accurate about what they need, accurate about reflecting back to them what they've said or shared. When you talk about this chameleon quality, it's a really at least I think of it as a really unconscious kind of operating system that keeps that feeding and nurturing that connectivity that feels like it's my lifeline,
Right.
Yeah. So, and unplugging that, severing those connections, disconnecting that plug can feel really painful, really, really painful, until you realize that you actually can plug back into another outlet that is yourself, which you've been describing in such a cool way. Do either of you have practices that you'd be willing to share with others that are listening or watching, about specific things that you do to come back home to yourself?
Alex?
Well, I do a lot of, I need a lot of practices when I wake up. First, I wake up, I need an hour or two to myself to just go on the computer, to just do little things like that. So working for myself has been a blessing, because when I was working for someone else, I lived my life by their guidelines and I never took breaks. I worked to exhaustion. This chameleon thing you're talking about goes all the way back to the schoolyard, of how I can hang out with the skaters, the goths, the jocks, anybody. And when I come home, I like to spend a lot of time by myself. I also like to go to my 12-step program meetings and connect with people there every day. And making sure I'm taking care of me eating, that I eat, that I drink water, I got water, these basic needs. And a big thing that I've been doing lately is the moving the body a lot. I like to just bounce up and down like this and shake and just get connected to myself. So mostly just having alone time and being okay with that and saying, hey, outside world, it's Alex time. Doing that. That's probably the biggest thing for me.
Right. So I have a lot of different practices, but the very first one I was given actually came to me through my spiritual director, and then in that first class on the welcome practice. And that welcome practice, in short, is to be able to welcome, letting go of my desire for affirmation, affection, and esteem. Welcome, 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 welcome. That's a big thing for a 2. I let go of my desire for safety and security. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I let go of my desire for power and control. Really? Welcome, 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 welcome. And the last one, I let go of my desire to change the situation exactly as it is. Welcome, welcome, welcome. No, welcome. Really? Welcome. And that turns out to be one of the most powerful practices I've ever had. It comes out of the work, the centering prayer work of Thomas Keating, but letting go, it took me a while to understand. I was not letting go of my need for those things because those are vital things, but my desire or my strategy for that. And as a heart type 2, my strategy is around affirmation, affection, and esteem. And so to let go of that and allow life to be exactly the way it is and not have to fix it, control it. So Alex, I love the 12 steps. I go back to the first one all the time. I have my own version of it. I let go of my desire to control other people, and the extent I try to, my life has become unmanageable. And so it's always, again, I think it's about that codependence piece. Again, and being able to meet life where it is in reality, not in the past, not in the future, but right in this very moment. So that's been a huge practice for me all this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the letting go thing is a huge part of my daily ritual. And I'd even put that in perspective as a 2 type. It's something that I do daily, and it helps everything out. When I can let go of a relationship that's falling apart, and then me just say, okay, I'm letting go, whatever happens, happens. It just brings me so much freedom.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and freedom is the name of the game for a 2. That's our holy idea. So freedom for me is to be able to be myself, who I am, without pleasing other people. And I remember a woman years ago saying she learned how to be a pleasure rather than to try to please.
Ooh.
And so she was just being herself. And that automatically got her where she wanted to go without trying to please people. So, so all of these are really good practices.
Yeah. So summarizing, just kind of summarizing some of what you have both shared about the practices for a 2, and within the context of understanding the Enneagram, we have 3 ways where we gather information, take in information. We take in information logically or through our heads, take in information through our hearts, our emotional center, and we take in information through our bodies. And, you know, you have talked about really checking in with yourself, not taking information from the outside through those centers, but the welcoming prayer and the practices that you described, Alex, are about really checking in with those centers in your own various ways, movement in the body center and looking at power and control, and meaningful connections in the heart center and not being codependent. And, you know, and logically looking at things through discernment and not just having thoughts randomly, you know, hither, thither, and yon, trying to find safety, security, and certainty. So just honoring the fact that we have these 3 portals, these 3 centers where we're taking in not just information from the outside, but we can really watch it as it comes in for us personally, is just a wonderful way to summarize, I think, what you both have shared in terms of your individual practices. Thank you so much. We are about to enter our final segment after break, where we'll talk about challenges and assets of our type. My name is Renee Siegel. If you'd like to know more about my work, you can check it out at yourpurepotential.com. That's the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to joining in with you again right after break. Thanks for joining us in our final segment of Enneagram Conversations as we continue to dialogue with Robin and Alex about their experience and life as someone who identifies, or people who identify as type 2s. And we're going to talk about the gifts, the high side, the easy part, the assets of being a 2, and then the challenges, the opportunities for growth. And as we move into this conversation, your type and your challenges and assets will stay the same in your type, whether you've been working on it for 40 years or for 6 months. So just hold that notion as we explore this conversation. So what are the gifts of being a 2?
The gifts are just being able to be in the flow for me of any given situation, in the rhythm of it, feel the pulse of it, the joy of it. Really, the type 2 is about loving other people through and caring. And so when I'm in that place, again, it's a circle where I'm able to let love flow through me, which comes, it's not abstract, it's not a concept. It means I'm able to hear people, connect with people, respond to people, all of that. So that's a lovely gift. And then that comes back to me. And so it's really a type of being in the flow, which is very different than when I'm challenged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's perfect. The whole being in the flow thing is the biggest reward. When I grew up with a loyalist, I was taught that don't trust the world, don't trust anything, everything is untrustworthy. And it wasn't until before I got sober, when I got really honest with myself, that I want relationships, because I had no relationships. I messaged over 100 people personally in my phone, and no one responded. And all I want is relationships. And the world told me I wanted a Lamborghini in a house, but really all I want is to be connected. And the whole connection thing you're talking about being connected to the universe and the flow. I drive down the road and then I'll see a bug or a butterfly or a bird flying with the car. I love that. And I love that connection more than material stuff, just being connected to people, but also being connected to the world too. That's a huge thing I didn't even put together until now. Yeah, that's a big reward for me, is having every day seeing the little God shots throughout the day.
Right.
Yeah. And there's an innate capacity with 2s for care. I mean, I know that a lot of times it becomes a challenge in terms of demonstrating it towards yourself, but there is an innate capacity to just nurture and
Right.
love others, not just see and be part of the flow and the connection, but just, I find it fascinating that some people don't know how to do that because it's so easy,
And it is empowering for other people as well as for yourself.
Yeah. Yes. And and what about kindness? Where does kindness show up in 2 land?
I think it's natural, unless I'm in type. I mean, if I'm in the higher side of my type, it's just natural. If resentment is there, or irritation, or any of those other things, when I'm sort of more in type, kindness is nowhere close. But again, in the flow of things, it's natural.
Mm-hmm. So you're bringing up a really cool point as we transition to talk about some of the challenges. So when a 2 is not attending to themselves, when they've lost sight of themselves. This whole notion of kindness and nurturing and feeling connected and all of that is more difficult. It's like the innate gifts of the type are really more available when we're demonstrating, when twos are demonstrating self-love as well as love
Right.
for others. So
Right.
let's talk now about that challenge, about, what happens and how resentment and lack of kindness, or, or some of those disowned qualities or the less becoming qualities show up. And what are they?
Well, for me, it's simple. It's overgiving. It's overgiving, and then it's giving that wasn't asked for, and it's giving because that's what I do, is give and give and give. But when immediately, so that's the biggest challenge. And how that onion, we talk about peeling the layers of the onion. I don't use that analogy anymore because I'm long past the onion. It's more like a spiral that goes on and on for the rest of our life. Because only a week ago, I found myself starting to volunteer for something that really truly did not have my name on it, but I did it out of my habit. And something happened that I wasn't able to volunteer, and it was like a wake-up call to me, because that was an aspect of overgiving. And so that anytime I feel resentment or irritation, it's like that blind spot indicator in your car that said, wake up, pay attention, because this is where you have lost yourself. And the invite then is to come home to yourself.
Beautiful.
Yeah, the challenge of just overgiving, and then I get a resentment because I'm overgiving. Maybe it wasn't asked for, or maybe it's expected now because I've trained everyone in my life
Right.
that I'm here for you, period, and nothing for me. And that's been, still is, and not as much, but a big challenge to overgiving, being available, and not protecting me. And that might sound selfish or whatever, but I'm going to constantly be giving. So it's good for me to be selfish every day at times, because that's how I could actually even give more, in a sense. I don't know, it's a paradox, but that is a big challenge of not over giving and loving myself too, because I'll
Right.
get lost in others and what about me, and put that oxygen mask on that Renee
Right.
always likes to talk about. I
Right.
need to put that oxygen mask on myself before I can help out others.
Absolutely. And I don't call it selfish anymore. I call it self-care.
Yeah.
And other people are really grateful because they see how needy we are when we don't. And so when we start taking care of ourselves, people appreciate that. That's been a lot of my feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, for the two to take the focus and place it on themselves and become self-focused, or to demonstrate self-care. It's not selfless and it's not selfish. It really does
Right.
bring the attention, gathering your attention, and it requires bringing it home to yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I am so delighted that the two of you were my guests today, and just a beautiful conversation. And I hope our listeners and viewers got a flavor of the type 2. They certainly had every opportunity through the lens of your type to hear that information. Embracing all the aspects of your type is just the beginning of your journey, the assets and the challenges. And self-compassion is one of the core ingredients that it takes to soften your ego. You can do this by following your breath, claiming inner peace, and moving forward with grounded presence. I am Renee Siegel, your host, and so grateful for today's podcast. If you want to know more about my work, you can find it out at yourpurepotential.com. That's the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for listening to Enneagram Conversations. Renee is on a mission to guide people towards cultivating inner observation, which assists with self-awareness and expansion. Identify your type, notice your patterns, and learn how to unlock the higher aspects of your Enneagram type. There is limitless potential inside you already, just waiting to be unveiled. Join Renee next time on this journey of self-discovery and create more purpose and power in your life. For more information about Renee and her work, visit youarepurepotential.com. That's the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. Until next time, remember, you are pure potential.